Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the debut episode here of season 2 of the Booking Office, the Booking Office Express, as we're calling it this season. And why are we calling it the Booking Office Express this season? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, if you were watching last season, you know that I gave Greg Hunter a challenge, one challenge that went over the whole season. It was covering the 1992 WWF, using the 92 heels, but also, 91 and 92, using the 91-92 heels, but using the WCW babyface roster from that same time period. So Hunter did a really good job on that. Did a bang up. I mean, just so you know, I thought it was compelling. Thought his storylines were solid. Thought everything went through good. So he decided to one-up me this year. And so how did he do that for this season? Well, he decided to give me a series of different challenges that we are going to go through here in the next few weeks. Pretty much one a week, except for what I've been told through our finales will actually be one that takes a few weeks, about 2 or 3. So we'll see how that pans out here as we go through. But challenge number 1 is the one that we're going to cover today. What basically Greg Hunter did was he gave me a time frame of the WWF, from 1978 to 1983. During that time frame is when Bob Backlund was the world champion. But in our alternate universe, alternate reality, whatever you want to call this here, it is not going to be Bob Backlund as champion. It is going to be the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, as your world heavyweight champion. And my goal was basically to get the belt from Dusty in 1978, have him have the run from 78 to 83, and get the belt, eventually to Hogan. Would I use a transitional champion? What would I do? That's some stuff that we're going to find out here in just a little bit. But anyway, basically the way I started this out is after their epic battle in Madison Square Garden, Dusty is revealed to have suffered an injury and will miss action for about 4 months. On TV, Billy Graham and the Grand Wizard are cutting promos on how they put Dusty out of wrestling. We come back to January at the Garden, and Graham is taking liberties with a young competitor, possibly in the opening match. And Dusty makes the save. He cuts a promo. He gets a promo to challenge Graham. Later on the night, they come back out and they battle to a no contest. On TV for the next couple weeks, I have Rhodes challenging Graham for one more match. Title versus career. The match of the Garden goes 40 plus minutes, back and forth. No heel stuff from Graham. Clean pin. No blood. I want this to be kind of a coming out party for Graham. And I noticed I said title versus career. Not so much Billy Graham putting his career on the line, Dusty putting his career on the line. So this was Dusty going for the title. If Dusty lost, he was going to retire. Getting back there, in March of 78, Graham and Dusty Rhodes go around the circuit. There's tag matches, promo spots on TV. They do not have a singles match until we get back to Madison Square Garden. Dusty goes over in the rematch via DQ when we have Stan Stasiak and Luke Graham interfere in the match. They are beating down Rhodes. By this point, I would want Billy Graham kind of shit canned to the outside of the ring. And I want, just Stasiak and Graham just going to work on Dusty, just beating the fuck out of Dusty. And then we have Billy Graham in just this moment of clarity on the outside of the ring, slides in. We think he's coming in to make this a 3-on-1. Nope, he is there to save Dusty Rhodes. The following week on TV, Billy Graham cuts a scathing babyface promo about how the Grand Wizard, Luke Graham, and Stan Stasiak had actually cost him a chance at becoming a 2-time WWF champion. At that point, Dusty comes out, gives the rub to Billy Graham, even though, really Billy doesn't need the rub. But, just kind of solidify that babyface turn. They form a tag team, and they're going to challenge Luke and Stasiak at the next event in the Garden. Which brings us to April of 1978. Dusty goes around the circuit and matches against various heels. Graham and Rhodes never team until the Garden. Very important for this. I want people on TV to see it. I want them to see Dusty and Billy as a tag team, but I don't want that moment to actually happen until we get back to Madison Square Garden. So Graham and Rhodes never team until we get to the Garden, like I said. Although Billy Graham works Stasiak in some of the smaller towns. I do want that feud to kind of play out through the smaller towns. We get to the Garden. It's Billy Graham and Dusty against Stasiak and Luke Graham. Dusty takes most of the heat, and it seems at times as it was just a setup to get Rhodes weakened. However, Rhodes makes the hot tag to Billy Graham. He cleans house. And Wizard comes in on the distraction, allows Luke Graham to get the heat on Superstar. He's going to go a few more minutes. Things start to break down into a brawl. Luke Graham brings in the weapon into the ring, Nux or something small. I don't want chairs or anything crazy like that. Just, something that, we can see has it, but it has to be small. Hits Rhodes from behind. The referee's back is turned. Stasiak gets the pin. Outside the ring during all this is the Grahams with Luke leaving Billy bloody. So it's Luke and Billy Graham getting their thing going on, and Luke actually leaves Billy Graham bloodied. So we come back in May. We have a huge double main event in the Garden with the Battle of the Grahams on the undercard, being the semi, and Stasiak and Rhodes for the WWF title is going to be our main event of the evening. Luke is actually going to get the best of Billy with some shenanigans, and then the main event, Dusty goes over clean. There's no interference. There's nothing there. But when we go back to TV, Dusty's attacked by Luke Graham, setting up next month's main event at the Garden, which will be in June, will be Dusty versus Luke Graham. That's going to end in a count-out victory for Graham when George Steele appears at ringside yelling for Dusty. Steele grabs Dusty's belt and runs off. Dusty gives chase and is counted out. So, naturally in July, we're going to come back. It's Dusty versus Luke Graham again. Dusty goes over clean, and after the match, George Steele appears again and attacks Dusty. Now, this is going to happen after the match. So there is no disqualification. There is no question to what happens. Dusty gets his, gets his heat over Graham. On TV, George Animal Steele is being sold as a maniac who's out of control, much of the way they booked him in the 60s and early 70s, up until, I guess, about the mid-80s is when they really started kind of scaling back on him being the maniac, just being a loon, I guess you could say. He's out of control. He's going to be managed by Captain Lou. I know I introduced him with the Wizard during some of the Wizards matches, but Albano's going to be the man. Albano cuts promos on Dusty. During one episode, Captain Lou calls Dusty out to the interview area. Dusty goes out and is attacked by Steele, who again leaves the champion bloody. At the Garden, Dusty is set to take on Steele, but Albano comes out and says he isn't ready for Steele to wrestle Dusty just yet. But he does have a challenger for him, and out comes Ivan Koloff. Koloff brutalizes Dusty, which brings out Steele. We have a 2-on-1. Albano instructs Steele and him to brutalize him more. Dusty's left laying. No save. Nobody comes out. On the following TV, Dusty challenges George Steele once again at the Garden. Dusty continues to challenge Steele to a match at the Garden. Albano comes out and says that George isn't ready, but Koloff wants his rematch. Dusty agrees only, but if Albano Dusty agrees, but only if Albano agrees that once he beats Koloff, he gets Steele. Albano agrees. At the Garden, Albano distracts Dusty, and Koloff gets the win via countout. After the match, Koloff brings in a long chain and beats Dusty with the chain, and he's going to leave the champion bloody. Dusty's on TV doing an interview when we see Ivan Koloff and George Steele do an attack again using the chain to once again bloody Dusty up. The next week, Dusty comes out for another interview and challenges Koloff and Steele to a tag match with a mystery partner in the Garden. We get to the Garden, and we have Dusty and Bruno Sammartino versus Koloff and Steele. Dusty and Sammartino go over with Bruno pinning Koloff. In the afterbirth, Albano grabs Sammartino and handcuffs him to the ropes. Still, Albano and Koloff attack Dusty. They are bloodying him up, and Graham this time will make the save. We're still going to use the chain in this one. We go to Thanksgiving night. We have a huge Thanksgiving night at the Garden with Koloff, Still, and Albano versus Dusty, Graham, and Sammartino. The heels are going to go over after Koloff pins Dusty, again using the Russian chain and an Albano distraction, which really, Albano's in the match, but he just kind of gets Dusty's attention to, be able to attack Dusty with the chain. So we're going to come back Christmas night at the Garden. Dusty versus Koloff is going to be a Russian chain match. If Dusty wins, he gets 5 minutes with Albano. The match ends in a chaotic no contest involving Still and Albano, and we're going to hang Dusty this time. So we're trying to set up where, we want the Still match to mean something. So that's why, we keep involving Still in there, but, Dusty's not getting his hands, but at the same time, he's getting all these competitors thrown at him. And he's getting, Koloff, a former champion, ended Sammartino's reign as champion, excuse me. So this is something that, would make a lot of sense. New Year, we come in January. Dusty celebrating 1 year as champion. He wants a rematch with Koloff, but this time he wants to bring in his own weapon of choice, and it's going to be a Texas bull rope, which we've already seen with Dusty and Billy Graham. So if Dusty wins, excuse me, if Dusty wins, he once again gets his 5 minutes with Albano. Dusty goes over, but before he can get to Albano, George Still comes out and is going to leave Dusty laying again. We go into February. Valentine's Day Massacre at the Garden is Dusty versus Still. It's a brutal war that goes all over the Garden and ends in a no contest. It is announced on TV in March of '79 that that Still will challenge Dusty in a cage for the title in the Garden. Dusty goes over and grabs the microphone after the match and reminds everyone he is yet to get his 5 minutes with Albano, which he would have gotten 2 months before. But security escorts Albano back in the ring. Dusty's going to beat the dog out of him and is going to leave Albano laying. So, he gets his win over Still, and he gets his get back at Albano. So it's kind of a slow burn, but he gets there. Between April and October of '79, now here's one thing that I started doing because I knew this would be long. I kind of cut things down into different sections where it was important to go through the months. I did that, but for this, between April and October, Dusty's going to defend against a variety of heels in the company. He's not really going to have a program because I want to make the title the program. I want guys going after the belt, and not necessarily having personal issues with Dusty. At this point, based off the success of his different cage matches and whatnot and his different six-mans, Bruno's going to start a full-fledged comeback and expresses a desire to return to the WWF title by 1980. Bruno's request for matches against Dusty is constantly rejected by the championship committee, despite his status as a former champion and his win-loss record. Basically, it's going to be, Bruno, look, you've had your run. You can come in, you can wrestle, you can do whatever. If you earn your way up, you may get a title shot, but you just can't demand it. In November, Lou Albano announces his new protege, a masked man named El Mascialo, which I don't speak Italian, but I did do the Google search on this. This is the Butcher in Italian. He is showcased on TV in Shine matches and is going to be working opening matches throughout the circuit. He does not appear at the Garden this month, though. Meanwhile, Bruno is still featured on TV as well in Shine matches. He is in the opening match at the Garden this month, basically selling his comeback and trying to reestablish himself as a top contender. This month, Dusty defends the WWF title against Swede Hansen. Christmas night, December 1979, Bruno is going to introduce his newest protege, Larry Zbyszko. Larry Zbyszko takes on the Butcher and is brutalizing him. And the Butcher is brutalizing him, excuse me. He's brutalizing the Butcher. Dusty makes a save at the Garden. Zbyszko gets a rematch against the Butcher and is beaten in less than 4 minutes. He is bloodied and brutalized. Dusty again makes the save. Dusty defends the title in the same card against a random heel. It's not really going to be, it's not going to matter who that heel is. It's more of a shine match for Dusty. In January of 1980, Hulk Hogan comes to the WWF and challenges Dusty. Bruno continues to shine on TV. He cuts a promo with Zbyszko, apologizing for not being there for him to make those saves that Dusty did. The Butcher continues to brutalize opponents on TV. We go to the Garden. We have Hogan and Zbyszko with Hogan over. Bruno faces Ivan Koloff and goes over. And the Butcher faces Superstar Graham and goes over. The match with Superstar Graham is kind of a convincing win for the Butcher. It's not going to be... It's going to be competitive, but it's not, if that makes sense. Dusty's going to face Mr. Fuji and go over. At the end of the match, the Butcher and Hogan attack Dusty. Zbyszko saves Dusty this time. We move on to February of 1980. On TV, Zbyszko and Dusty cut a promo. Bruno comes out and apologizes again for not helping out. He had to leave the Garden for family reasons. Albano comes out with the Butcher, and Hogan makes a challenge at the Garden. Hogan and Dusty battle are going to battle to a 1-hour draw at the Garden. Now, before we move any further, I know a lot of people are like, Hogan in an hour. I think Hogan 1980 and Dusty for an hour would be something that could be entertaining. It could be something that would actually get over and, you know, would do good, I believe. Excuse me. So... I'm reading my notes here, guys. I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost here. So we go there. Albano comes out with Hogan, makes a challenge at the Garden. Hogan and Dusty battle to the 1-hour draw. Bruno's going to defeat Ivan Koloff, and the Butcher is going to defeat Zbyszko in brutal fashion. And it's going to be learned that he hospitalizes him, because coming up on TV in March is revealed that Zbyszko is going to be out for 6 months due to his injury. Dusty and Bruno challenge the Butcher and Hogan at the Garden. Dusty comes out for the match without Bruno. It is announced that prior to the event, the WWF received word that Bruno was attacked outside his private gym and is at an undisclosed medical center. It looks like it's going to be a handicap match until Andre the Giant comes out to team with Dusty. Andre and Dusty go over with Andre pinning Hogan. I know. After the match, all hell breaks loose when Andre is incapacitated. And Hogan and the Butcher again attack Dusty, and they're going to break his hand. Dusty is interviewed, but he refuses to relinquish the championship due to the injury. He signs a waiver to compete with the broken hand, that he will not hold them responsible. He challenges the Butcher to a match at Garden. Albano comes out with Hogan and Butcher and tells Dusty that he and Hogan have unfinished business. When Dusty couldn't beat Hogan, it's an MSG rematch, where Hogan and Dusty again go to the 1-hour draw. On TV, we have San Martino and Hogan wrestling each other. Hogan's going to go over. Dusty and Hogan's rematch is at MSG. It does end in a schmoz as the Butcher and Steel come out to attack Dusty. It looks like a 3-on-1 until we do the same thing we did just a couple years ago. Hogan makes the save. Also on the show, we're going to see Stan Hansen make his debut, which moves us to June of 1980. Stan Hansen's being built on TV. He beats San Martino in a televised match. At Madison Square Garden, it's Hogan and Dusty versus the Butcher and George the Animal Steel. Hogan and Dusty goes over when Hogan pins Steel. On TV, Hogan and Steel have a wild brawl that sets up a loser leaves town match at the Garden. Hansen's continuing to look strong on TV. He defeats Pat Patterson for the Intercontinental title at Madison Square Garden this month. Dusty defeats Ivan Koloff, but again is attacked by the Butcher, and Hogan loses his loser leave town match, so Hogan is now gone. Bruno announces his retirement on TV. Dusty comes out to congratulate him. They embrace. Zbyszko comes out still in the neck brace, but is attacked before he could approach the interview platform by Stan Hansen. Dusty makes the save. We go to Madison Square Garden, where Dusty faces Hansen, and Zbyszko interferes in the match, trying to get revenge on Hansen. It is also announced that the Butcher is on tour in Japan. In September, Hansen blames Zbyszko for not being able to win the WWF title. Zbyszko challenges Hansen for the IC belt at Madison Square Garden. Dusty defends against Ken Patera. Zbyszko pulls off the upset and wins the Intercontinental title. Dusty's going to go over on Patera, and at the end of the match, the Butcher attacks Dusty. Zbyszko attempts to make the save, but is cut off by Hansen. On TV, Dusty and Zbyszko make a challenge to the Butcher and Hansen. Albano comes out and tells them that Michello cannot be in the Garden, but they can face Steel and Hansen. And then we get to Madison Square Garden. Hansen and Steel faces Zbyszko and Rhodes. The match goes about 7 minutes when the Butcher comes out and attacks Rhodes. Zbyszko is handcuffed to the railing while the three men work over Dusty. And then we get to November of 1980. On TV, Rhodes states that he wants the Butcher one-on-one. Hansen comes out and tells Rhodes that he needs to stop overlooking him and give him one more shot. Hansen challenges Rhodes to a Texas bull rope match on December 8th in the Garden. Now, there was no November match, or November show in Madison Square Garden that year, so we're doing 2 in December. On the December 8th, 1980 show, Rhodes and Hansen battle in a bloody Texas bull rope match. Rhodes wins, but again is attacked by the Butcher. On TV the following week, Rhodes makes a challenge to the Butcher. He says it's obvious the man behind the mask has a big problem with him and that only a coward would hide his face. He challenges him to a title versus mask match. December 29th, 1980, title versus mask match is a classic. Lots of brutality in the match, but also we're going to see lots of back and forth. We're going to see a little bit of wrestling. Rhodes goes over and is calling for the mask. Albano and the Butcher try to escape, but come back to the ring with Dusty in the middle, demanding the mask comes off. Very slowly, the mask comes off and reveals Bruno Sammartino. Dusty's in shock, and before he knows what happens, Bruno has recovered and he leaves Dusty laying. All right, so that takes us to January of 1981. On the TV, I'm going to have the faces reacting to Bruno's heel turn. I think it's a significant enough event to where there would be genuine shock from the baby faces. One of the most vocal, of course, is going to be Larry Zbyszko. And actually, Zbyszko is going to be approached by his former mentor. Sammartino tells Zbyszko he purposely injured him to keep him out of the way and that he warned him. Sammartino then tells Zbyszko to leave, which Zbyszko is going to refuse. He is then attacked by Sammartino. Sammartino is asked why he turned his back on Dusty. He walks off. At Madison Square Garden, Sammartino is going to win the Intercontinental title from Larry Zbyszko. Rhodes is going to defeat Hansen one more time. Sammartino is going to come out during this match, and we're going to have a big face-off there. For February and March, on TV, we're getting promos from both men, Dusty and Bruno. Bruno finally explains why he turned on Dusty, citing he was being overlooked for title opportunities. He's going to call himself the greatest WWF champion of all time, and Dusty is just a slob of a man. Dusty couldn't be man enough to give him a shot. So at Madison Square Garden, we're not going to get Dusty and Bruno just yet. Instead, they have separate matches. It is then announced on the card in April, Dusty will face Bruno one-on-one. Dusty and Bruno is going to go in April. Dusty and Bruno will go 1 hour. But Bruno is going to be very close to winning the championship at the very end of that match. But he cannot get the pinfall before the bell rings. And then we're going to do another one of these groups of months here. So between May and August, Bruno keeps lobbying for another title shot. The match is then signed for the August card, the big summer card, there at Madison Square Garden. It's going to end in a double countout after interference from George Steele and Larry Zbyszko. We are going to get a series of tag matches with Dusty and Zbyszko against Sammartino and Steele. That's going to happen between September and December of 1981. In November, Zbyszko is going to upset Sammartino to reclaim the Intercontinental title. During this time, Sammartino challenges Dusty to one more match. At the December Madison Square Garden show, it's going to be Dusty versus Sammartino in the cage. The match goes at least 45 minutes with Dusty going over. That happens in December. And then between January and March of 82, we're going to see Sammartino on TV challenging Dusty again. Sammartino agrees to put his career on the line for one more shot at the championship. We see a visibly angry Captain Lou questioning why Sammartino would do that without consulting him. The match is signed for March at Madison Square Garden. Sammartino, in the meantime, starts having shine matches on TV, and on the house shows, he looks very, very dominant. During this same time, Dusty's in matches at house shows and is looking like a strong champion. We got to keep building him up, of course, even though we're about 4 years into his reign. We see Zbyszko approaching Dusty and says, you know, as the Intercontinental Champion, I think I've earned a shot at that title. Dusty's going to kind of dismiss Zbyszko, telling him to concentrate on defending that IC title. That should be the most important thing to him at that time. So then we get into March of 1982. There's going to be a lot of hype surrounding the Madison Square Garden match. We see Albano and Sammartino actually getting into arguments about the match as they, you know, about the approach to the match, actually. Albano claims to have a surefire plan to help Sammartino walk away as a 3-time champion. Sammartino asks Albano to stay in the back during the match. He's like, hey, I don't want you out there. This is going to be a one-on-one. Albano refuses. He says, I am going to be in your corner, but he promises no, you know, gaga, no monkey business, whatever you want to call it. Zbyszko continues to hound Dusty during this time, and Dusty kind of continues to tell him to concentrate on holding that Intercontinental title. At Madison Square Garden in the semi-main, Zbyszko is going to lose that Intercontinental Championship to Superfly Snuka, who is being managed by Captain Lou Albano. Then Albano comes back out in the main event with Dusty. Dusty and Bruno are going to put on a clinic of a match. I'm going to give them 1 hour. During the match, we see Sammartino kind of returning to his babyface ways. He's doing a lot of the stuff that we saw Sammartino do as a babyface, and not so much as working as a heel. In the finish, Sammartino is going to still be standing, but Dusty is just going to outlast him. We do a respect spot with Dusty and Sammartino, the handshake, you know, Sammartino congratulating Dusty, handing him the title, you know, the whole 9 yards on that one. But, you know, Dusty's going to leave the ring. It's going to be Sammartino there standing tall, you know, kind of like, hey, he just lost, you know, this career versus title match. Albano is going to attack Sammartino. But Sammartino's going to get the best of him. And then we are going to see Sammartino about to decimate Captain Lou. But Snuka is actually going to come out and attacks him. Snuka leaves Sammartino laying and has to be carried out on a stretcher. Dusty never makes a save because he didn't know what was going on in the ring. So that's going to take us between April and October of 1982. Dusty's going to continue to look like a strong champion. Zbyszko's still trying to get that title match with Dusty. Dusty agrees and finally faces Zbyszko in April. Snuka interferes in the match, and Zbyszko just walks away without making the save. Just kind of disgusted with everything that's going on. On the next TV, Zbyszko is asked why he didn't help Dusty. Zbyszko says that he thought Dusty could handle himself. Why would he bother with him? Dusty's going to confront Zbyszko, and they shake hands. On TV, there's a tag match with Zbyszko and Rhodes versus Snuka and a mystery partner. There was never any mystery partner to begin with, because it is a trick to get Dusty in a 2-on-1 situation. They beat him down, leave him lying. During the summer, it's Dusty versus Zbyszko as we go around the circuit into the Garden. And it's going to end in August with Dusty winning the feud decisively. We need to have a feud where there's no doubts. But I want Zbyszko to go over strong. I'm sorry, I want Dusty to go over strong on Zbyszko. Not so much to bitch out Zbyszko, but just kind of to give Dusty that you know, what he needs. Snuka during this time is going to continue to dominate in hotshot feuds with Pedro Morales, Tony Atlas, and Paul Orndorff. These are all baby faces who came into the territory during that time. And then in September and October, we're going to build towards a Thanksgiving match with Snuka versus Rhodes. In these matches, Albano always interferes, and Dusty can never actually get the pin on Snuka. So we come into November on TV. Dusty says he's tired of Albano sticking his nose in his business. He says at Madison Square Garden, he'll have a man in his corner to even the score. Of course, when we get to the Garden, Dusty's going to introduce Bruno as the guy who's in his corner. The match breaks down with Sammartino and Albano getting involved. Sammartino does not get his hands on Albano. We come back Christmas night, 1982. It's going to be in the Garden. It's Snuka versus Rhodes in the cage. Stipulation is if Rhodes wins, Sammartino gets 5 minutes in the cage with Albano. Superfly Snuka is going to hit the Superfly leap off of the cage and is going to pin Dusty for the title. So Christmas night, 1982, Dusty loses the World Heavyweight title, which is going to take us to January of 83. So between January 83 and April 83, San Martino is going to join the announce team, but is constantly being ridiculed by Albano and Snuka. They're going to, pick on him, whatever they got to do to kind of get his attention. Meanwhile, Dusty's on the road to regain the championship. On TV, San Martino is being verbally assaulted by Lou Albano. San Martino goes to grab Albano and is ambushed by Snuka. Dusty's going to make the save. April match of the Garden is Dusty versus Snuka again, with the stipulation if Dusty wins, San Martino's going to get 5 minutes with Albano. And at Madison Square Garden, Dusty becomes a two-time World Heavyweight Champion Dusty is not going to become a two-time champion quite yet. Dusty is going to beat Snuka by DQ. Albano goes to walk away and is stopped, and San Martino finally gets his 5 minutes with Albano, which is a bloodbath and a beatdown. It's going to look good. Crowd's going to go crazy. As Jim Cornette would say, people were throwing babies in the air. We go to May of 83. Dusty faces Snuka in a Texas bull rope match. Albano's going to be banned from ringside, and Dusty's going to go over. This is where Dusty becomes the two-time heavyweight champion of the world. Between June and November of 83, Fred Blassie will begin sending different people to attack Dusty. Each month at the Garden, we have a new heel challenging Dusty Rhodes. So for that, June, July, August, September, October, about 6 months, or 5 months at the Garden, we're going to see a new heel. At the November event, Dusty faces the Iron Sheik. Sheik is brutalizing Dusty and is disqualified. Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov are attacking Dusty when Hogan makes his debut back into the WWF and saves Dusty Rhodes. At the December 26th, 1983 card in Madison Square Garden, which is most famous because this is where the Iron Sheik would win the WWF Heavyweight Championship from Bob Backlund. Dusty's going to defend the title against the Iron Sheik himself, and there will be a Christmas present battle royal. The winner will get a shot at the WWF title at the January Madison Square Garden event. Hogan is going to go over in that battle royal. Dusty goes over on the Sheik. So for January, we are set for Hogan versus Dusty for the WWF title. January of 1984. Here we go. The match is built over the 4 weeks of TV with Hogan and Dusty talking about the respect they have for each other and how much Hogan has grown in the past 4 years since he left the WWF. The match in the Garden is quick. Hogan is dominant from the bell and beats Dusty in less than 10 minutes. They have the big respect spot with Hogan and Dusty shaking hands. Because I want to close out the chapter on this with Dusty and Hogan. In February, Dusty's going to get a mandatory rematch at the Garden. I don't have them touch anywhere else on the circuit, but instead build towards the rematch. And again, Hogan is dominant in their rematch. There's no doubt about it. The only thing this time, I have it maybe go 12-15. Dusty gets a little bit more in because I feel that, if this was a shoot, Dusty has a better understanding of what Hogan's able to do now. So he would be a little bit more prepared. We go 12-15. Dusty is going to go under. Hogan is made. Hogan becomes the world, retains the World Heavyweight Champion. And, because he has that strong showing against a guy who's just been a 5-year champion. Of course, Hogan's going to go on to his own 4+ year reign. And then, of course, in the aftermath, Dusty leaves and is possibly going to head to Crockett or Florida around this time. I assume a bulk of this run is under Vince Sr., and the relationship with the NWA is good. And there's even a possibility that Dusty has some kind of relationship going the whole time. Hogan continues on his big run towards WrestleMania. If I, was booking beyond this, not sure what I would do. WrestleMania may look just a little bit different, but that is a different story for a different time. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode of the Booking Office Express. Don't forget, more challenges coming up very, very soon here on Carolina Geek. I'm very proud to be, hosting the Booking Office Express for the season 2 for the Booking Office, and hope you guys have enjoyed everything I've given you here today. Maybe gave you something to think about. Dusty as a WWF champion, I mean, I just really, it's hard to picture, during that transitional point of Dusty being the champion. But I think with the right booking, the right people, building it around the right ways, it may have been something to look at. It may have been something that would have been interesting. But of course, then again, maybe we didn't get some of the other excitement that we got with Dusty being where he was in the Crockett territory and in the Carolinas. Or, I'm sorry, with the Crockett territory and in Florida with the Grahams. So, hey, hindsight's 2020. We can sit here and play guessing games all day we want, but you know what? That's part of what this is about. The booking office is a chance for us to fantasize about what we would have crafted in our perfect world. So if you have any feedback at all, make sure you hit me up on Twitter at JJTheBody. You can also leave feedback here. Just leave your comments. If you have ideas for booking challenges, hit us up with those, because we're always wanting to take those too. But until the next time, I hope you guys have a great week. Hope you guys have enjoyed this here, the Booking Office Express. I'm John the Body Johnson saying, see you next time.